Hello, my name is RUTH WESTOBY. I'm a first-year doctoral student at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and I'm a practitioner of Ashtanga Yoga. Thank you ever so much to Embodied Philosophy for inviting me to be part of this online conference with such an esteemed group of speakers. The title of the talk that I'm going to give is The Esoteric Feminine in Haṭhayoga Sources. And in this talk, I'm going to map the esoteric feminine aspect of the yogic body. Taking a textual, historical, and anecdotal approach, I'm going to explore how the yogic body is presented in gendered terms, probe the substances or concepts that are to be influenced, and trace the metaphorical maps for manipulating the yogic body. Hathayoga texts are written by men, for men, about men. They display a caution bordering on prejudice towards women and tend to dissect and objectify the female form. There are some references to female practitioners and practices for women, and the use of women in ritual contexts. Despite the scant evidence of female practitioners, there is a strong theme of accessing and manipulating female energy for soteriological, or rather spiritually transformative, ends. The yogic body is conceived as concepts or substances, which are male and female, such as bindu and rajas, śiva and śakti. The metaphors developed to describe and map how these constructs can be manipulated include the female serpent energy, Kuṇḍalinī. An inquiry into the gendering of the yogic body draws into focus an ambivalence towards desire and reflects on ideals of soteriology and realities of social status in pre-modern India. So let's situate the yogic body within ideas of modern yoga. Yoga is a global phenomenon, and it means many different things to many people, usually physical postures or asana, breathing techniques or pranayama, and meditation or samadhi. How yoga practices work on the body and mind are explained through different paradigms: biomedical, scientific, medical, theological or devotional, through the intercession of a teacher or a guru, or esoteric. The esoteric involves manipulating layers of the body, psyche, or mind that are more subtle than the physical aspect. Visualizations, mantras, and meditations can be used to work with the mind. Moving, refining, intensifying, and stilling the breath can be used to work with prana. There are techniques to control sexual fluids within the body, bindu and rajas. These fluids are often construed as masculine and feminine forces, which are to be preserved, unified, and raised within the body or within the yogic body. These gendered polarities, found in the corpus of pre-modern Sanskrit texts, are susceptible to manipulation by practitioners or ritualists to engender physiological and psychic transformations. As well as bindu, which is semen, and rajas, which is menstrual blood and female regenerative fluid, there is śiva, consciousness as male, and śakti, power as female. The ontological status of these substances range from physical to imagined. They are fluids, maps, paradigms, heuristic devices to explain and be leveraged at the intersection, or the meeting point, of the physical, theoretical, religious, psychological, and philosophical. And their effects likewise range from physical shift within the body of the practitioner to psychological transformations, to physical death and psychic liberation. Jumping back 1,000 years, Hathayoga arises in a milieu of Tantra and Vajrayana and develops a rich account of subtle physiology as gendered, the practice of yoga as the use and manipulation of sexual substances, whether physical or psycho-spiritual substances, and liberation as real or metaphorical sexual union. The ontological status of these substances is fascinating. The following is a quotation from James Mallinson and Mark Singleton's Roots of Yoga, a recent and extremely helpful translation of many source texts on yoga. On the yogic body, Mark and Jim write, "These nexuses, conduits, and substances have varying levels of empirical existence. Some are visualized in meditation, and others are manipulated by means of physical techniques. Some, such as Kuṇḍalinī and the chakras, are to be visualized in their earliest teachings, but become increasingly corporeal and thus subject to physical manipulation. Falling somewhere between the extremes of literalism, metaphor, and imagined ritual apparatus, these substances can be generated, collected, intensified, transferred, and deployed for power, longevity, or liberation. My interest in this area was prompted by the search for women practitioners in the textual sources on Hathayoga. The sources have a lot to say about men, but it is difficult to find examples of female practitioners. Women are dissected and objectified. Women are used for the soteriological emancipation of men. Were there women practitioners, or were there merely consorts for male practitioners? What can we deduce from these texts about the social status of women and about women's eligibility for liberation? Though the evidence on female practitioners is sparse, the use of gendered constructs is ubiquitous. By looking at the gendered esoteric concepts used to explain processes of Haṭhayoga, we develop a fascinating picture of the yogic body and how the yogic body could be manipulated to achieve the soteriological and power-orientated goals of Haṭhayogans. Also, we see how female characteristics are presented, and perhaps learn something of the social relations between genders. Hence, by focusing on gendered yogic body concepts, we find ideas of women, social relations, and indeed how yoga is thought to work. Having given this general introduction to the topic, I would like to first step back out and look at the larger historical context. Second, look at gender relations in Hathayoga sources, that they're by men for men, the text's ambivalence towards women, the evidence for female practitioners and practices for women. Third, explore the gendered yogic body, bindu and rajas, Kuṇḍalinī, and briefly look at the techniques to manipulate these models. In concluding this talk, I'll touch on ideas of lustful women, attempts to discipline desire, and the divine feminine and social purity. There's a lot of interconnected ideas here, and I'm going to make a number of claims or tentative suggestions or simply questions. Here they are. Women are sparse, but gendered descriptions of the yogic body speak volumes. Rajas, the female equivalent of bindu, is difficult to define, yet often is considered of co-equivalent stature to bindu. The paradigms of the yogic body explain how yoga works, how the body and mind can be manipulated to effect a transformation of physical form, power, and consciousness. Women's bodies and power are a site of contestation, to be controlled and manipulated. This is apparent from the Kuṇḍalinī metaphor. In the methods of control, there are both themes of violence and of worshipful reverence. Women are sexually objectified yet supplicated for their power. This is the rationale of many tantric practices. We can trace the roots of this theme to an ambivalence towards the lustful nature of women and anxieties around male desire set out in Vedic texts. This ambivalence is articulated around the requirement for householders to produce sons and the danger that the desire cited in women poses to ascetics anxious to retain their seed. The social status of women involved in sexual ritual, whether the ritual is real or imagined, plays on tensions concerning desire, purity, and power, such as in relation to Kuṇḍalinī women. The esoteric explanations may point more to a social interpretation than a soteriological one, explaining the roles and relations of men and women in this world, rather than beyond. Though largely objectified in this discourse, there are spaces within the rhetoric and practice of traditions of religious renunciation, figured in gendered terms, in which female practitioners may assert agency. We can find examples of this in modern Baal traditions. So, taking a historical approach, I'm going to outline the treatment of desire and the development of ideas around bindu or semen. But before that, a word on sources and some of the problems we encounter. I am being selective rather than comprehensive in the choice of anecdotal examples from the vast literature of the Indian tradition, selecting the bits that speak to what I'm interested in. My approach is based on a textual tradition rather than accounts of lived traditions of Haṭhayoga. This provides a snapshot of time, offering a limited perspective. there are various methodological problems that arise in approaching these sources. The voices of women are not recorded. The texts are by men, for men, about men. Women tend to be an object of the discourse rather than subjects acting out their own agency. The traditions and lineages are shrouded in secrecy. This is particularly the case with Tantra and also in Hatha traditions. The esoteric code language deployed in the texts is designed to be transparent to the initiated but obscure to the layperson. The meaning of some texts may have been lost over time. Scribal attempts to clarify terminology where the original meanings has been lost lead to corruptions. For example, we see that Hatha texts have become more diverse over time, but less precise. As snapshots of history, texts record particular moments in time, and we have to infer the wider picture. For example, Hatha texts codify practices in the 10th and 12th centuries that we can deduce were being practiced in the 5th century before the Common Era. However, these difficulties do not invalidate a textual approach, but indicate the limitations. Turning to the historical context, the purpose of this selective survey of how a fragment of Indian sources treat the subject of desire and the preservation of semen is to provide some context for the discussion of the Haṭhayoga models of bindu and Kuṇḍalinī. It also serves, I hope, to explain the questions relating to women, practitioners, and substances that prompted my interest in this material. In Indian thought, desire is powerful, subversive, and frequently associated with women, according to R.T. Thand and Shaman Hatley. Desire is both resisted and exploited for pleasure and liberation. A conceptual dichotomy along gender lines contains and explains and utilizes or controls desire. The oldest extant strata of texts, the Vedas, established this gender dichotomy. The Vedas were composed around 1800 before the Common Era to 500 before the Common Era. In the Rig Veda's cosmogonic hymn, the Nasadiya, water and semen are procreative principles. The hymn traces the chain of creation through breath, a signless ocean, heat, thought, desire, and primal semen. To quote the hymn, there were places of semen and there were powers. There was inherent force below, offering above, translated by Brereton and Jameson. The female is the fertile waters or the field, the object, whilst the male is impregnator, the agent. We see here that the Vedas have initiated a pervasive trope, that of the loss of seed. The dictum is that men, householder men, should procreate for siring sons, but male ascetics should control their seed. In the Vedas and the narratives, ascetics struggle to live up to this ideal. We see that a woman, such as Lopamutra, may threaten her husband Augusta's asceticism and acquire his power through sex. In the Upanishads, from around 800 BCE, before the Common Era, we find esoteric explanations of the moon and semen in their role in the process of transmigration. One of the forms that the theory of transmigration takes, as it is developed in the Upanishads, is the path of the fathers for those who return after death, and the path of the gods for those who do not return. The sight of the moon plays a key role in these cycles. According to Jan Conver, the association of the moon with transmigration is rooted, and I quote her, not in the moon's undeniable association with fertility, but with its most essential characteristic, its periodicity, and, on the other hand, in the widespread belief that the human soul or mind is periodically away from the body. The Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana briefly has it that a person who has died and been placed on the funeral pyre is sprinkled down in the form of semen by the moon. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad uses a description of 5 fires in the development of the rebirth doctrine. This narrative or metaphor again uses the idea of semen and is of note in relation to the role assigned to women. The first fire is the world up there. The second is a rain cloud. The third is the world down here. In the fourth fire, we hear in Brihadaranyaka 6:12-13, of fire, that's what a man is, Gautama. His firewood is the open mouth, his smoke is breath, his flame is speech. His embers are sight, and his sparks are hearing. In that very fire, gods offer food, and from that offering springs semen. A woman is the fifth fire. Correlations are made between firewood and vulva, smoke and pubic hair, flame and vagina. Her embers are when one penetrates her, and her sparks are the climax. Brown-Black has noted the division here into agent and object. The man is described as having a mouth, speech, sight, hearing. He has agency. He springs from the offering. The woman is split into her physical sexual organs, and her role is constrained to sex. This division of man as agent and woman as object, and also the woman is dismembered into sexual organs, is continued within some of the sources on Tantra and Hatha. The Mahabharata epic, compiled between 500 before the Common Era and 500 after the Common Era, often associates yoga with warfare. It was the martial aspects of yoga related to the conduct of warfare and control of death that first captured my interest in psycho-spiritual substances such as tejas and tapas.